It happened during our company's 10th anniversary party in downtown Austin. One of those nights that felt like it was supposed to mean something, milestone, celebration, whatever. I showed up with Lauren, dressed down but still sharp. Soft pink shirt, navy suit. She picked it out, actually. Said the color made my skin look warmer, less pale. Said it was bold but in a good way. I took her word for it. I usually did. She, of course, looked like a walking headline. Fire red dress, that silky kind of fabric that slid like water when she moved. She always knew how to pick something that made people stop mid-conversation. And she loved it. Loved the pause, the subtle glance, the turn of heads. It wasn't just attention she wanted. It was confirmation. A room of strangers nodding that yes. She was the most captivating thing there. And standing next to her, I never really knew if I was part of the display or just background. We had drinks. Made the rounds. She did most of the talking. I laughed at her stories, made polite small talk with the VPs, and tried not to let my social battery hit empty too early. It was the usual routine, her leading, me supporting. I didn't mind it most of the time. Felt like a rhythm we'd settled into, maybe too comfortably. At some point during the night, the HR director announced an open mic. Share a funny memory from your time at the company. Light-hearted, casual. Lauren lit up. She didn't even glance at me before walking up. Just grabbed her wine, smoothed her dress, and made her way to the stage like she owned it. She started with a safe anecdote. Her first day, tripping over the glass door in heels, getting coffee spilled on her blouse. People laughed. She knew how to deliver a story. That part wasn't new. But then she pivoted. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. And of course, she said, with that saccharine smile she wore when she was about to say something brutal under the pretense of charm. How could I forget Mark showing up to a leadership meeting dressed like Barbie's first boyfriend? That pink shirt, though. Bold move for a guy still trying to convince people he knows how to change a tire. There was a pause. Half a second. Like the room wasn't sure if she was serious. And then the laughter hit. Loud and full. Like someone had pressed play on a laugh track. Too loud. I felt my chest tighten. Like the air had shifted. I managed to smile. At least I think I did. Just enough so it didn't look like I was rattled. That's the trick, isn't it? When someone you love throws you under the bus, you pretend it's funny. You smile so no one sees the bruise forming under your skin. I could feel my ears burning. My palms were damp. I told myself not to react, not to give her or anyone the satisfaction of seeing me crack. But something in me fractured, quietly, like a small snap you only hear if you're paying attention. The thing is, it wasn't the shirt. It was never just about the shirt. It was the way she said it, the way she wrapped my identity, my masculinity, into a tight little joke and tossed it out like confetti. She didn't just mock my style. She mocked me, who I was, what I projected. And she did it in front of everyone I worked with, people I had meetings with, people who now had a fresh story to pass around when the next happy hour rolled around. I sat through the rest of her little set. My body didn't move. My face stayed frozen in that barely there smile, the one you wear when you've just been gutted but you're trying not to bleed in public. When she stepped down, people clapped. A few coworkers looked my way, probably unsure if they should say something. A couple gave me that pitying glance that felt worse than the joke itself. I couldn't do it anymore. I stood up. Slowly, deliberately. Lauren had just taken her seat when she noticed me. "Hey," she said, half laughing. "Don't be mad. It was just a joke." That sentence, that just a joke, nearly broke me. I didn't say a word. Just pushed in my chair, straightened my jacket, and walked out. No dramatic exit. No loud door slam or angry glare. Just gone. Quiet and clean. As I walked out of the building, the night hit me. It wasn't even cold, but my body felt numb. The buzz of traffic, the muffled music from inside, the click of my own footsteps on the pavement. It all felt distant, like I wasn't really there. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, pretending to check my phone so I wouldn't have to face the fact that I didn't know what came next. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was hollow, like someone had scooped something out of me and left the shell behind. And for the first time in a long, long while, I realized something that should have been obvious. I didn't recognize the version of myself that stood there in that pink shirt. The guy who smiled through public humiliation. The guy who let the woman he loved *P******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** surprised. He didn't go home after the party. Didn't even think about it, really. He just started driving. Out of downtown. Away from the noise. Away from the image of Lauren on that stage. The crowd laughing. His own frozen expression mirrored in the reflection of wine glasses. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just drove. It was as if some autopilot had taken over, like his body knew it couldn't go back there. Not yet. Eventually, he pulled into the parking lot of a dive bar on the edge of the city. One of those places where the neon signs hum louder than the jukebox and the air smells like old cigarettes and rain-soaked pavement. It looked half-abandoned from the outside, but that's what made it perfect. No expectations. No familiar faces. No reminders. Inside, it was dimly lit and quiet. A couple of regulars hunched over their drinks, staring into nothing. The bartender gave him a nod but didn't ask questions. He appreciated that more than he could say. He slid onto a stool near the window and ordered a bourbon neat. It arrived in a scratched-up glass, and he took a slow sip, letting the burn settle into his chest like an anchor. Outside the window, the rain had started, light at first, then steadier. He watched as the droplets slid down the glass, illuminated by the soft blue glow of the sign that flickered. Open. Everything felt surreal. The party, the laughter, the way Lauren's voice cut through him like a scalpel hidden in sugar. He thought about the look on her face when she spotted him leaving. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't concern. It was confusion, like she genuinely didn't understand why he wouldn't laugh at her joke. That's what made it worse. She didn't just hurt him. She didn't even seem to register that she had. The bourbon went down too fast. He ordered another, then another. He wasn't trying to get drunk. He was just trying to feel something other than humiliated. He sat there for what could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. Time stopped making sense. The bar was quiet enough that he could actually think. Something he hadn't done in a long time. Not the rushed, frantic thoughts that filled his head when Lauren was around, demanding something from him, shaping him with comments and corrections until he barely recognized himself. No, this was different. These thoughts were slower, clearer. He thought about how he had changed since they started dating, how his wardrobe had shifted subtly over time, how he used to wear rugged boots and flannel, and now half his closet looked like it came from a curated fashion blog. How she made suggestions about his hair, his glasses, his posture. Always suggestions, always gentle, but always insistent. First, he thought it was love, that she just wanted the best version of him. But sitting there, watching the neon reflection in his bourbon, he realized that it wasn't about love. It was about control. He had been slowly, quietly edited. It was in the small ways where they ate, who they hung out with, how he decorated their place. The color of his shirts. The tone of his voice in public. He'd laugh less loudly. He'd stand a little straighter. He'd pause before speaking, just long enough to make sure his words wouldn't invite a correction later. He wasn't a pushover. At least he didn't used to be. But somewhere along the line, keeping the peace became the priority. And the price for peace had been him. His edges smoothed. His words measured. His world reshaped to fit hers. The bar lights flickered briefly. He looked around and saw that the regulars had mostly filtered out. The bartender was wiping down glasses, glancing occasionally at the muted TV above the bar. He took out his phone. One message from Lauren. Not a call, just a text. Hey, that joke landed weird. Are you okay? He stared at it, rereading it twice. Landed weird. Like it was the punchline's fault. Not hers. Like she wasn't the one who crafted it with the precision of someone who knew exactly where to aim and how deep to stab. He didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't turn into a loop of explanations and justifications. And truthfully, he didn't have the energy for it. He locked his phone and set it face down on the bar. More than anything, he just felt tired. Not in the physical sense, but something deeper. Soul tired. like he'd been holding his breath for months and now, suddenly, he realized he didn't have to anymore. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about every moment leading up to it. The microcuts that never bled but always stung. The way Lauren would joke about how he wasn't like other guys, when what she really meant was that he was softer, easier to bend, more agreeable. He had laughed it off every time. Even started to believe that maybe it was true, that he was lucky to have someone like her, someone so sharp and beautiful and dynamic. But that barstool gave him clarity. For the first time in years, he saw the shape of his own reflection not through her eyes, but his own. The man in the pink shirt wasn't weak. He was just tired of pretending, tired of swallowing words to keep things smooth, tired of walking on a leash made of compliments that always came with conditions. He finished his drink and stood up. The rain had softened, the streets slick and glowing under the pale orange streetlights. He stepped outside, took a deep breath, and felt something loosen in his chest. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going back to their apartment tonight. Maybe not ever. He showed up the next morning just after sunrise. The streets were still empty, the city not quite awake yet. It had rained most of the night, and the wet pavement reflected the pale blue of the sky like glass. He parked 2 blocks away from their apartment, her apartment now, maybe, and walked the rest of the way in silence, carrying nothing but a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The key still worked. That detail hit him harder than he expected. Something about turning it in the lock and hearing the click. It made everything feel heavier. Like the door opening was giving him one last chance to pretend things were normal. But as soon as he stepped inside, that illusion shattered. The place didn't feel like home. It hadn't for a long time, if he was being honest. The apartment was spotless. As usual, Lauren couldn't stand clutter. But there was a coldness to it. The kind you don't notice when you're in it every day. But once you've stepped away and come back, it hits you in the face. The walls were covered in framed prints, her taste. The throw pillows lined up too perfectly on the couch, her habit. Even the faint scent in the air, something floral and expensive, felt foreign to him now. He didn't call out, didn't want to. He heard movement down the hall, the rustle of sheets, the familiar creak of the bed frame. She was still asleep. That made things easier. He walked past the living room, down the hallway, and into her bedroom. She stirred as he stepped in, squinting against the light. "Mark?" she asked, groggy. Her voice caught somewhere between confusion and concern. "What time is it?" He didn't answer, just walked to the closet, pulled open the door, and started packing. That got her sitting up. "Wait. What are you doing?" Her voice sharpened, more awake now. She pulled the comforter around her like armor, like she needed to shield herself from what she already knew was coming. He didn't look at her. Folded a shirt, rolled a pair of jeans, dropped them into the bag. His hands moved slowly, methodically. No anger, no rush, just focus. "Mark," she said again, more forcefully, "can we talk about last night?" He zipped up the side compartment and finally turned to her. She looked small in the bed, swallowed by the sea of white sheets and expensive pillows. Her makeup from the night before was half wiped off, her hair still pinned awkwardly to one side. "There's nothing to talk about," he said. His voice was calm, not distant, just done. She sat forward, frowning. "It was a joke, Mark. A bad one, maybe, but you didn't have to disappear." He laughed, softly, not out of amusement, but disbelief. "A joke," he repeated. "Sure, just a joke." Her expression tightened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," he said, slinging the duffel over his shoulder. "I'm just seeing it clearly." "Where did you go?" she asked, folding her arms. "I called you. I know. And you didn't think you should respond? After you just walked out like that." He stared at her for a long beat. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. People I work with, people I trusted. And you did it with a smile like it was nothing. And when I left, quietly, by the way, you didn't chase after me. You didn't even text until an hour later. That tells me everything I need to know." She opened her mouth like she had a response ready, but nothing came out. Just silence. He stepped into the hallway and paused. He looked back at the bedroom, not her, but the room. The furniture, the walls, the life that had once felt shared. "I'll send for the rest of my things," he said. "You don't need to pack anything. I'll handle it." "Mark, wait," she called after him. Her voice cracked a little. He kept walking, past the framed wedding photo near the bathroom, past the ceramic bowl on the table where they always tossed their keys, past the fake plant she insisted looked so real. None of it meant anything anymore. No slamming doors, no dramatic speeches, no storming out, just the quiet sound of footsteps fading into the morning. Outside, the sky had started to brighten, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The air was crisp, cool against his skin. He climbed back into his car, tossed the duffel onto the passenger seat, and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. He felt empty, not in a painful way, more like something had been pulled out of him, and what was left was waiting to be filled with something real. He checked his phone. A few missed calls from Lauren. One voicemail he didn't bother opening. No point. He wasn't looking for an apology, and even if she offered one, it wouldn't land the way she thought it would. Some things you just don't walk back from. He started driving with no destination in mind. Let the city stretch out in front of him. Block after block passed like static, storefronts, gas stations, quiet neighborhoods where sprinklers clicked on in perfectly timed arcs. Eventually, he found himself pulling into the lot of a motel. Not a shady one, but not exactly upscale either. Just somewhere. Somewhere to breathe. He paid cash, took the key, and let himself into the room. It was nothing special, basic furniture, stiff bedding, the faint smell of cleaning supplies, but it was quiet. At least for now. He dropped the bag by the door and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the beige carpet. The stillness pressed in around him, not threatening, just unfamiliar. He wasn't used to silence. The absence of her voice, her perfume, the constant background hum of needing to be on for her. It all left a space he wasn't sure how to fill. But beneath the fatigue, beneath the surreal fog of the last 24 hours, there was something else. Relief. A flicker barely noticeable. But it was there. He didn't know anyone anything right now. Not an explanation. Not a performance. Not a version of himself sculpted to make someone else feel secure. He could eat whatever he wanted. Wear whatever he wanted. Sit in silence without being asked what he was thinking every 10 minutes. That freedom, small as it was, felt like the first real thing he'd had in a long time. The apartment he found wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, small balcony, scratched hardwood floors that creaked in certain spots when he walked barefoot. The kind of place that didn't make a statement. But that was exactly what he needed. No matching throw pillows. No curated gallery wall. Just space. Space that was entirely his. The first night there, he slept on a mattress on the floor. No bed frame yet. He hadn't figured out what kind he wanted, and he wasn't in a rush to decide. There was something honest about that. For once, he didn't have to make a choice that would be judged, critiqued, adjusted. He'd spent years in a relationship where decisions came with disclaimers. Now, he got to sit with silence and let it echo around the empty rooms like a promise. He started filling the place slowly. A second-hand couch he found online. A set of plates that didn't match but somehow made the meals feel more real. He bought plants, even though he was pretty sure he'd K*LL half of them. Still, he liked the way they made the air feel more alive. He hung nothing on the walls. Not yet. Felt good to leave them blank for a while. He worked remotely most days, sitting by the window with coffee in hand, laptop open, the city humming faintly in the background. The hours passed quietly, and he didn't mind. His schedule became his own. No texts asking when he'd be home. No reminders about dinner plans or social obligations he hadn't agreed to but would be guilted into. He started making breakfast for himself. Eggs and toast. Sometimes just fruit and black coffee. He played music without worrying whether she'd hate it. There were days where the quiet felt like a weight, like something pressing into his chest. But more often than not, it felt like a reset button. A place where his thoughts could breathe. Where his decisions, no matter how small, were finally his again. Lauren texted a few more times in those first couple of weeks. The messages were spaced out, growing softer, more careful. At first, it was confusion. Can we talk? I don't understand why you're making this so final. Then came defensiveness, cloaked as concern. I think you're blowing one bad night out of proportion. Everyone laughs at themselves. You used to laugh at yourself. Then silence for a stretch. And then, eventually, guilt. I miss you. I know I didn't always get it right, but I never thought we'd end up like this. I never thought you'd just leave. He read them, every word. But he never replied. Not once. He didn't need to punish her. That wasn't the point. It wasn't about revenge or making her feel the loss. It was about boundaries. About finally choosing himself after years of being chosen only for what he could provide. How well he could adapt. How much of himself he could shave down for her comfort. His old friends started reaching out again. Some had fallen off the radar while he'd been with Lauren. Not because they'd abandoned him, but because he'd quietly pulled away. He hadn't noticed how much he'd isolated himself until their names popped up in his messages. Invites to grab a drink, catch a game, hang out for no reason at all. He said yes, more than once. The first time, he almost didn't go. He stood at his front door for a full minute, hand on the knob, wondering if he'd know how to be social without her hovering beside him, managing the conversation. But he went, and it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. He laughed. Actually laughed. Not the kind you use to diffuse tension, but the kind that starts in your chest and bubbles up without permission. That night, after he got home, he sat on his balcony with a beer in hand and realized something surprising. He didn't miss her. Not her voice. Not her scent. Not the way she'd curl up next to him on the couch. Not even the routine they'd built over years. What he missed was the idea of her. The version of her that had existed before the edits. Before the snide remarks disguised as jokes. Before the corrections in public, the helpful suggestions that left him feeling small. That version hadn't existed in a long time. Maybe it never had. One night, months after the party, he ran into someone from the office. A guy named Riley, from the IT department. They hadn't talked much before. Just hallway nods and the occasional email thread. But now, in line at a coffee shop, Riley clapped him on the shoulder like they were old friends. Hey man, good to see you, he said. How've you been? He hesitated, unsure how honest to be. But Riley didn't wait for a real answer. I gotta say, what you did that night, walking out like that, damn, that was the coldest, smoothest move I've ever seen. Everyone's faces. She kept talking like nothing happened, but you could feel it. The room changed. Whole vibe went quiet after that. He didn't know what to say, just gave a small smile and nodded. You look good, by the way, Riley added. Different. Lighter, maybe? Whatever it is, it suits you. He ordered his coffee and walked out, heart beating a little faster. Not because of Riley's words exactly, but because they reminded him of something he hadn't fully grasped. He hadn't just left Lauren that night. He'd left behind a version of himself that wasn't real. A version that tried too hard to belong, to be liked, to be unoffensive. A version that apologized before speaking. That waited to be told who to be. Now, he didn't apologize for who he was. He didn't seek approval. He stood still in his own skin and let the world adjust to him, not the other way around.